What's up, peeps? What you're about to see is actual footage of what happened when I tried to create this cabinet. I've watched this footage back so many times and I still can't figure out exactly how any of this happened. I highly suggest watching this video with a white candle burning. And, you know, maybe an apple cider donut too. For luck. Welcome to the Halloween Challenge. This challenge is hosted by Meg over at Lovely Jubbly Furniture, and I will leave the link to her channel and this playlist all down in the description. But before we get too happy, let's check out just how spooky this makeover really was. It started out innocent enough. I cleared the drawers and everything appeared fine. Okay, something I want to do is just show everybody the inside of these drawers because, all right, it looks as if there is a maker's mark in this drawer. It's in the bottom of the drawer, but the thing that's weird, there's one in the second drawer, and there's one in the third drawer. This drawer we'll talk about in a minute, but there's not one, however, come on, you got it, in the bottom. It's also not on the side, so like these drawers were changed or put in the wrong position or anything. I've done extensive research trying to find out if this piece is a real Cavalier because I cannot find anywhere that says that this is actually a piece of Cavalier furniture. My guess on this piece is that it was either like a floor model or maybe like something that they made for an expo so that they could showcase the kind of work that they do, because I haven't been able to find a duplicate to this anywhere on the internet. So we're doing some stuff to it because, wait a minute. Do you see that? Well, we're doing some stuff to it because apparently the dresser itself actually wants me to. I pulled out all 4 drawers and vacuumed every square inch of this piece, including this weird message. Then Mr. CCDIY helped me tip this onto its back, and I finished up all the vacuuming. Cleaning went fine. Thankfully, I didn't get any other creepy messages. Well, not yet, but I'll get to that in a minute. I used palm olive dish soap and warm water to thoroughly scrub this entire piece. There was a heavy layer of tobacco residue on this, so I made sure to really scrub everything. In fact, I went through 5 water changes just on the first pass, and I suddenly understood why this thing said, "Help me." Let's talk about this drawer, like I said we were going to do. Here's the deal. This drawer is pretty much full of surface mold. So I looked into how to remove mold from wood, and here's what I got from this old house. So I'm just going to keep going with the dish soap and water like I have been doing, and then in order to wipe these down, I think I'm going to use like a vinegar and water rinse and then a water rinse.
Once I started cleaning, it didn't appear to be mold. I actually thought it might be residue from an old drawer liner. While the piece dried, I headed to Lowe's to get the materials and supplies that I'd need to truly transform this how I envisioned it. I really wanted to pick up a few sheets of XPS foam, but sadly there was only one available. But I had a vision and it involved carving some foam, so I took a look at the expanding spray foam. Jackpot! Everything dried and the drawers looked pretty good, so I brought everything back into the garage so I could start sanding. I used my random orbital and a 120 grit sanding screen to complete the first pass on this side. I also ran this grit along the base and the front edge. Then I wiped down the dust to raise the grain. And I sanded the top. And finally, tackled inside the drawers.
For the 220, I'm going to use my orbital sander. What is that? What is that? Is that water? Is that oil? No, it feels wet. Okay. Not sure what that's about, but all right. I guess I'll let this dry before I sand it. So, 1 YouTube second for you while I try to figure out what the heck just happened to my piece here.
I told you, spooky, right? Anyway, to finish it off, I ran a 220 grit across the entire thing, but I did the rest of this off camera. I wiped everything down, and while it dried, I started working on some of the props that I'm going to use when I'm staging this piece. Hang in until the beauty shots to see how these turn out, but for now, let's talk about another really weird thing that happened.
Alright peeps, so here's the deal. Everything is sanded to 220 and wiped down, and now I want to talk about all of the issues with this piece. First things first, every drawer has tons of gouges and I just can't get those out. I know I could use an iron with like a steam heat, but there are so many of them that I would have to basically like wet down this entire thing and iron the entire thing. And ain't nobody got time for that. Also, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't work on most of it because it is just a veneer and I don't want to risk that lifting. So I can't do that. And this drawer in particular has this crazy weird stain. I can't identify it. It doesn't feel like stain. It almost feels like some kind of oil, veneer, and plywood base material is missing and chunked out entirely. I've got another one that's even worse up here at the top on this side. Now, let's talk the top, which I actually have to be on my tippy toes. Okay, I'm gonna drop all my stuff. Let's put this camera down so we can talk about these issues on the top. I have these 2 cigarette burns. I couldn't get those out. The worst thing though that I've got going on, I hope you can see this here, this lifting veneer in the back. I will be able to glue this down, but there's just so many chunks around it that it's really gonna be kind of a mess. So let me get my glue and let's get this glued down, and then I'm gonna get started on doing the shellac. Okay. what the, what? What the, oh my God. Okay, okay. I guess that's what I'm doing then, if that's what you want. Maybe you saw how this happened. Well, let me know in the comments if you did see how that happened, because I'm kind of freaking out a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, this piece is kind of freaking me out a little bit. In the meantime, I'm gonna use my Gorilla wood glue and glue down that piece of veneer back there. All right, that's there now. I'm gonna let that dry. That should take probably about an hour or so. But in the meantime, I'm actually gonna start doing the shellac on the drawers. This looks like shellac. Whatever. You're weird, piece. And we're done with that. Let's just get you into high speed while I shellac this piece, because I think you know what I'm doing.
I used a disposable chip brush and a thick sponge to apply a coat of liquid shellac to everything. In fact, I did 2 thin coats, waiting about an hour in between each, and lightly sanded between each coat with a rad pad. On top, I finished after the glue dried. I did all of that off camera, and I let it dry over the weekend because I did go pretty thick with the second coat. So, with time on my hands after shellac, I got back to the props, starting with these cylinders that I transformed to look like tall tapered candles. First step, hot glue drips and blobs that resemble melted wax. Once that hot glue cooled off and dried, I painted the outside and a bit of the inside at the top with some chalk paint. I used this custom color on a recent client piece and had plenty left over for these props.
All right, so it asked me to. We all saw that on the top, so I am gonna definitely paint this piece, and I have some wildly ridiculous ideas of some stuff that I'm gonna do in addition to paint, so hang in there because that's coming up in a minute. But first, I want to give a quick shout out to 2 of my absolute favorite furniture artists. That would be Sarah over at 445 Designs and Taryn over at Elegant Upgrades. I'm gonna link both of them below. I'm sure you're all subscribed to both of them already, but they inspire me every week. Their ability to kind of take romantic essences and grungy vibes and mash it up into something truly beautiful is super inspiring to me, and has been one of the reasons why I wanted to do this exact cabinet for this exact challenge. So I'm taking some inspo from both of those ladies today. I'm gonna do some texture. We're gonna get some bling on here, but it's gonna be spooky bling. So I'm just gonna get started. This paint that I'm using here is Hello Hobby. I'll throw that up on the screen right here. It's a new chalk paint to me that I picked up at Walmart. I thought I'd give it a try because, you know, whatever. This is my cabinet and I might as well test some products on my own stuff first. I'm mixing that in with some baking soda, and that is gonna create a nice, thick, textural vibe that I can get on the first coat. So enough yammering, I'm just gonna get started. Thick, chunky, thick and chunky. That's the way we like our texture. All right, everybody, I'm just gonna give it a try. Let's just go for it. No, I don't know that it's gonna be thick enough. It also doesn't need to be perfect. In fact, it's better if it's not for the vibe I'm going for here. It should be pretty cross-hatched and textury and just really thick and ooey gooey. So, all right, like I said, I'm just gonna get us into some high-speed action here. But I don't want bristles. All right, let me switch you guys over to high speed so you can watch me do the rest of this the same way, but much quicker.
Just in case you are concerned about me painting this piece, that's one of the reasons that I added the shellac in the first place. That's going to help to seal in all of the wood fibers, and just in case me or someone else in the future wants to refinish this, getting this paint off is going to be significantly easier with just like a scraper or some sanding tools. I let the first coat dry for about 2 hours, then I came in with an even thicker second coat in all of the sparse areas. And then I left the piece to dry for the night. So in case you weren't aware, yeah, that's the face I make when I'm slamming my finger in a drawer.
I am going to be using this Great Stuff expanding insulating foam. It's for gaps and cracks that are up to 1 inch. You spray it in using this little attachment, which I'm going to show you guys all of this in a second, but you spray it in using that and it actually expands out and it will fill in any gap. I'm not actually using it in that way. I'm going to use this as building foam, and I'm going to end up carving it to look like, well, you know what? Let's just keep that to ourselves because you probably already figured it out by the title. I'm envisioning how this is going to go. This is what I'm doing though. We'll see. Hopefully it does go exactly as I want, but I'm just going to get started on this. And yeah, let's read some instructions. I always like to read the can first. Use best by date on bottom of can. That date is August 30th, 2023. I think we're good. Shake vigorously for 60 seconds. Screw the assembly onto valve firmly. Dispense slowly. Mist water to speed cure. Interesting. I'm not going to do that though. I need as much time as I can get, I think. Okay, so I think I'm good. I'm gonna let those 2 cans just basically expel the rest of whatever they've got left because they were pretty much empty and spitting at the end. And then whatever that pile is, I can use for the same thing. This is my last can, so I'm actually just gonna hang on to this for now until later when I'm actually painting up all of this. And that way, if I need to make more, I've got another can on hand. I feel like I probably won't, but if I do, you know, that's cool too. So I'm gonna let this dry, and in the meantime, let's get into some high-speed action of cabinet distressing even further. You probably can't even see me. Let's do this.
I mixed up a few custom green shades using the same brand of chalk paint I used for the base and got right into painting. Full disclosure, I'm usually much better with less loosey-goosey finishes. I like the math involved in creating a perfect faux brick wall, the crispness of stripes, order. But I'm trying to be a bit less rigid about everything these days, so my art and life are imitating each other right here. For this first coat, I added various tones with brushes and sponges, and I'm going for a dirty, grimy, dripped on in a bayou swampy vibe. So I pulled everything directionally downward. I also used the water bottle to create drips and runny spots in the paint. I want this to appear as if it's been in the leaky roof swamp house of some salty old third-generation bog witch. I moved on to the second side and did the same thing all over again. I made sure to move around and vary the colors and patterning so it looked more organic. I pulled the tape right away and left everything to dry for the night.
All right.
The next morning, I got right to work on layer 3. For this layer, I wanted to use some bling, so I pulled out my copper paint from Folk Art. I measured out the circle and drew the guidelines for this off camera. In addition to this pentacle, I did a few other embellishments with the copper that I thought would fit in with the theme and vibe. Then I left this all to dry for a few hours. While that dried, I got started on the foam. This process, yeah, it took a hot minute to complete, so I'm not going to detail every minute of what I did and how I did it. In fact, a lot of this entire process was pure trial and error, so let's just roll with it. I used my Japan scraper, a utility knife, and a steel wire brush to remove and shape the foam, as well as to give the face a more believable bark texture. And I cleaned all the tiny flying foam particles as I went.
All right. I feel like you have the general idea of what I'm trying to do here. This is going to be like tree trunk, swampy vininess growing up out of the piece. These will be attached, but I want this to be able to be popped off in the future if you want to if I want to change this look. This is mine. I can do anything I want to it. What I'm going to do is the same thing that I just did with this, with the scraping, with the steel brush, and I'm going to do that on both of the side pieces.
I got a rough idea of which pieces I wanted on what part of the cabinet. I marked everything to make sure I line things up in the right spot when I'm gluing them into place. I used a Japan scraper to slice a straight cut through the foam at the drawer, then used the same methods and tools as before to distress each piece. I'm not gonna lie, all the squatting and bending to get this project done, yeah, by the end of this thing, my back was so hunched over, I wasn't sure if I was the swamp witch. For this layer of paint, I used the same colors as the last layer, and I used an eyedropper to apply it. I used the same dropper for every color. A little mixing just wasn't a huge concern for me with this finish. Then when it was somewhat dry, I came in with a sponge and a very light black paint wash over the entire piece. That further ages and weathers it. I brought all of this inside to paint because, well, honestly, I'd like to speak with a manager in regard to this mid-90 degrees in mid-October thing. Seriously, can someone do something about that? Please? Not gonna lie, I'd love the ability to stay out in my workshop after 11 in the morning. Honestly, really looking forward to November, but we're still here in mid-October, so I had to push on, and I pushed on in climate control. Anyway, I got this base coat on, and then I left everything to dry for a few hours. When it was dry, I could get started on the highlight color. I'm using a much lighter brown chalk paint to catch the high spots on these foam pieces. I used a chip brush and a dry brushing technique to apply it. This whole process only took me about a half hour. With everything dry, it was time to attach the foam. Now, I want this to be removable for the future, so the first thing I did was try attaching it with some double-sided sticky tape. I placed that on the back, then used a towel for protection on the front and clamps to firmly hold the piece in place. But that wasn't really enough for everything, so when I got to the sides, I actually shaped the pieces and then I attached them using hot glue. That fully did the trick. When I got to the drawers, I laid everything out first. I made slices at the openings on the top and the bottom of each drawer, and then I glued down the individual pieces. That way I could make sure everything lined up perfectly. For the longer pieces on the sides, I added glue in sections, but I glued down the entire piece at once. After adding hot glue to each section on the back of the foam, I held it in place for about 10 to 15 seconds and it was adhered. Then I could move on to the next section and so on for all the pieces on the sides. But when I cut back those pieces at the drawers, that meant I had exposed foam. So I added some of the dark brown paint to all of those exposed edges, or really anywhere else that foam might have split or cracked during installation. I also added a little bit of paint to hot glue blobs that happen to come out the side. That way they'll just look like they're part of the vine. And I added a light coating of the lighter tan color to complete the look. I left everything to dry overnight. And the next day, I used a very watered-down black acrylic paint with a fitch brush, and I applied a wash over all of the foam pieces. I feel like that just helped to give a more realistic vibe, and it added a few more spots of dripping decay to the piece itself. Then I left the whole thing to fully dry for another night. To finish off this workshop dresser, I had to protect the piece. I used General Finishes Flat Out Flat top coat, and because of the texture and vines on this thing, I used kind of a non-directional method of application. Basically, I flooded a section, then used my purdy to spread it, pounce it into depressions, and sweep it across the vines. That really helped to move it around without getting pooling or any drips. Once that dried, I stepped back and marveled at the crazy transformation of this piece. Remember what this thing looked like when I started on it? For me, this was about a 3-week process to complete this dresser, and as far as I'm concerned, it was worth every second I spent. I love how this turned out. Thanks again to Meg over at Lovely Jubbly Furniture for hosting this playlist. Links to everything will be found below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done that already. Plus, let me know what you think about this cabinet. Here come the beauty shots. Thanks for being here and watching. Later, peeps!
And I think that'll do. Maybe I'll do it again a second time. I was really excited. Okay. Come up a little bit, because I don't think I'm much hotter in the cabinet. I did okay in the first take. I'm way too excited, but it is what it is, man. You guys can see this. It's super cool. I mean, I think it's going to be super cool. I know, right?
Okay, that's fun.
It's going to be so fun!
I brought all of this inside to wait, I already did this one. Okay, moving on.